Hey everyone, welcome again to another installment of The Way It Is. And I am Luca with RE/MAX Service First Realty. And I am delighted to have with me Mark McLean. And Mark is a 30-year real estate industry veteran. He's held several positions in management, including a founder partner of Sotheby's International Realty Canada in Ontario, a manager at Bosley Real Estate, which is the largest and oldest independent brokerage in Ontario, and president and broker of record at property.ca Realty, where he grew the agent count there from 75 to over 240 agents in 18 months, opened 3 satellite offices in the GTA, and became one of the top brokerages in the city, closing over 800 million in transactions. He's been a director at large and president of the Toronto Real Estate Board from 2013 to 2017. And he's chaired many committees and task forces. And why we have him here today is because his next iteration is he is the vice president of KEY. It's a leading sales and it's the first co-equity model in Canada that helps renters own for as little as $15,000 and gets them building equity faster and help them and not to have to qualify for a mortgage. And so, given the timing of this, given all the news sound bites in the news over the last couple of months about housing affordability and everything, I thought this was Mark was actually introduced to me by a colleague here at RE/MAX. And Mark, welcome. We're delighted to have you.
Well, thank you so much, and what a great intro. When you say it out loud, it sounds like I've really been doing a lot. So, so that's a great thing.
I think we should all hear our eulogies before we pass on, just to see if we actually accomplished anything or not, right?
I'm absolutely thrilled, to talk about KEY because it's so close to my heart, and honestly, I mean, my job is to talk to people on a daily basis. So it's a good that's my job because I love to hear myself speak. But the truth is that I hear the stories from people who say, like, I don't think I'm ever going to own. So and the frustrations that people feel on a day-to-day basis. And quite frankly, I feel like real estate in the country is completely binary. You buy, and if you can't buy, you rent, and there's no other choices. And so what we found is that the sweet spot for us and where our investors are coming from is saying, hey, we're banking on the fact that you guys have created an awesome third option. And that's it. How do we, because there was a time, 50 years ago when people would leave university and they'd buy a house, right? And then that's changed to now people saying, now I'm going to rent for a while, and then I'll own, hopefully save up. But that is just getting out of reach for so many people. And so, I think luckily there is a lot of technology in play. There's a lot of opportunity for new types of models to kind of come in there and try and solve it. And by the way, ours might not be the best solution for everybody, but we're just trying. We're launching something that we've got people in our system now. They never thought they were going to own before. They love what we're doing, and maybe there will be other solutions down the road. But you got to try something, right? You got to do something.
So I guess break it down for us in terms of its basic parts. So if someone said to you, what is KEY? I mean, take us, if I'm a first-time buyer or someone who's had that question and hitting their head against the wall, where do I go? How do I get started in this thing?
So I think ultimately what our company does is act like a platform. We go out and we find asset owners, investors, people who own 2 to 100 condos. Right now it's condos. Maybe we'll get into houses down the road, but they're investors, and what they're looking for is someone who will be a co-owner with them. They can give up a tiny little piece at 2.5%, but now they have someone who is living in their unit, who has got the shared sort of sense of, hey, if this goes up, I benefit from it, right? And I'll be the first to admit, it's only 2.5%, but you can continue to add from there. So it's sort of like, I'm going to buy this place. I'm going to continue to build equity by adding more money into the equation, and I'll get to that point where I'm at 5 or 10 or 15 or 20%, and then I can go. Then I'll buy it because you can do that.
Right.
So yeah.
No. And that's a good point. And we'll post after the podcast too. We'll post your link to the site on my website and as well, so others can go there and because it's great. It lays it out, and I saw the examples there. Yeah. But getting to this, what, you talk about this pool of investors. So why would a private investor participate? I guess what's in it for them?
Ultimately, I think what they get out of the equation is somebody who is going to look after their place more because they're invested in it, right? I think that's the best thing. They tend to stay longer, so the turnover is less, right? So that's a huge point, right? And I think the reality is that, I don't know what it's like in Kingston, but in Toronto, like an entry-level condo is $600,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is that if you, as CMHC says, you need to have a combined household income of $125,000 a year. I mean, that eliminates half our city right away. Boom.
Yep.
And you also need, $50,000 in cash between 5% down payment, closing costs, land transfer taxes, all that sort of stuff. And so with our model, you can get in with $15,000 on that same $600,000 condo, 15 grand, and a household income of like 65,000. So, what we're doing is really lowering that bar to help people get into the market, right? Now, and granted, you only get 2.5%, but we have a couple of tools that help you build equity quicker. And so you can go from 2.5% to 5 to 10, relatively quickly, right? And so you can actually use your condo like a piggy bank, and you have way more opportunities than you would if you were renting or if you're owning, right? Because if you own, you can certainly make extra payments at specific times, once, every year or whatever it is. And with ours, you can add every month. You can do lump sums. You can add $500, $100, $5,000. It doesn't matter. And I'll go into how we actually help build that equity faster.
Yeah, actually, I want, and because I do have that, and I have this co-financing benefit, I think is what you're talking about there. So, but before we get on to that, I want to still talk about these investors here. So, again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around them too. So, are a lot of them just conglomerates, like just corporations that own, they built these towers? They're the developers that built these towers and then just have a pool of them left over? Or is it people that bought in, speculating in them, and then now saying, I want to do that? I go on to get a sense of the nature of these.
It's a great question. So, and I'm talking to people on a regular basis, and I will talk to people who say, hey, I own 3 units or I own 5 units. Can your system operate with my 5 or 7 units? Sure. 100%. They're not conglomerates. They're family offices that may own 13 or 18 units. One guy I know owns 26 units. They could be builders that they've kept 5 or 6 units after the build, right? Mm-hmm. And so they've rented them out in the past, but now they're like, wait a second, this is actually a better opportunity for me to actually do some good, right? And I think there is a part of that, and it seems kind of crazy to say, but I think there is a part of that says that people do want to try and help, right? Because I think if you're an investor, you're already painted with a kind of a negative brush, but this is an opportunity for them to say, hey, listen, I want you to buy my unit. Take your time, right? Give me what you can, when you can. Yeah. So it does. There is some really, I think there's some good that happens as a result of this. So we get units from developers, as well as people who own 2 or 3 units to people who own 15 units right now.
Okay, so you talked about this 2.5%, and we used that sort of hypothetical example of that $600,000. The buyer's limited basically to what their qualifications are at 2.5%. So it could be a condo that's worth $800,000, for instance, or a condo that's worth $500,000, or a condo that's worth $1 million. Is that correct, or is there a threshold that sort of caps off at?
The 2.5 is based on the value of the condo today.
Okay.
So if it's a $600,000 condo, 15 grand. If it's a $700,000 condo, it's 2.5% of that. So, so our range has been typically 13,200 to 18,250 kind of thing. That's as the buy-in, right? And then the monthly payment that you make is geared to market rent, but it's a bit reduced because you have that 2.5% ownership. And by the way, you don't have to. 2.5 is just the minimum. If you want to put in, if it says 13,000, you want to put in 17,000 or 20,000 or 25,000, you certainly can. And there are a lot of people that have done that because they've got the deposit, they've got more than they needed, but their salary wasn't there, right? And so they feel like they're locked out of the market. So.
Okay.
And
So
yeah, go
no,
ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go
I
ahead.
was going to say that people do, I get questions all the time saying, well, why wouldn't I just rent and invest in REITs or something like that? And which is a fair question. I would say, yeah, if that's what works for you, totally do it. If you want to invest in crypto or if you want to invest in antique cars, like if that's your sweet spot, you should totally do that. Right.
Hmm.
And what I
Hmm.
say to realtors all the time is, look at, if you have a client that has a deposit and has a good job and great credit, and they're going to be in that place for a long time, and they have the closing costs, like 100%, you should sell them a house. That's the best thing that you can do, best thing for them as well. But there are a lot of people that are missing one or two of those things, right? I
Yeah.
talked to somebody who said, like, I moved to the city. I have the deposit. I have a good job, but I don't know where I'm going to be next year.
Right.
But in the meantime, prices are going up. And with our model, if you're in a year and you don't like it, you can leave and take your improved equity with you, right? So it
Okay.
gives you lots of options.
So let's get back to this co-financing benefit.
Yeah.
And you touched on it earlier. So how someone starts at the 2.5 and then maybe
Yeah.
can leverage their way up into a better percentage. Then, so talk us
Yeah.
through that part of it.
So we use the traditional. The example I always use is $600,000 condo. It's just a nice, easy number. That's what everyone's already used to. You put in $15,000. That's 2.5%. So what we do is we match that 2.5% with another 2.5% in debt that we assign to that unit. The money doesn't go anywhere. It's there, right? And you get the benefit of owning $30,000 or 5%. So you put in 15. We give you 15. You just like a mortgage. You own $30,000 of this unit, right? So if you were to leave, you'd have to obviously pay that. We'd obviously pay that back, but you have the benefit of 30,000. So let's say the market, and again, just a wild example, the market goes up 10% in the first year.
Mm-hmm.
It's that 30,000 that's going up by 10%, right? $3,000.
Okay.
That's your delta.
Yeah.
So if you said after the first year, look, I'm out. I don't want to be here anymore. You would get your $15,000 back. You'd get the 3,000 delta, and then you'd also get $50 a month, which we use as part of an equity boost for you. Again, it's just meant to mimic that that principle that you would get on, let's say, a $15,000 mortgage. Right. That's all it's meant to do. And so, in this regard, you're actually, because if you only put in 15,000 and it went up 10%, you'd make 100. You'd make 1,500, right? So what we do is help you double that, right, by having this. And what you're paying is a tiny little interest-only payment on that $15,000. So it's part of your monthly payment. And so what our model allows you to do then is, if you wanted to use this thing as your condo or your home as a piggy bank, 1 month I want to put in an extra $100. We match it with another co-financing piece. I get a bonus at work for $5,000. I put that in. We match it with another $5,000, right? So you start doing this. And so what happens is that interest payment that you make when you add more money, it goes up a tiny bit, right? Because it's a bigger number now. But what also happens is you're buying more of the condo that you're in, you're reducing the asset ownership piece, and you're lowering your monthly payment because the interest is going up by X, but the monthly payment is going down by more than X, right? So that's kind of how that works. And so now you have like this opportunity where you've got so many choices that you don't get when you own and you don't get when you rent, which is you come in, you decide that you don't, and by the way, you're paying, I'll talk about the monthly payment, but you're paying slightly less than market rent. You can go in and after a year, you don't like it, you can leave, take your equity with you. If it's gone up, you get to take that with you. If you want to do nothing, then that money just rides with you for however long you're there. If you want to continually add more, you can certainly do that. You can buy more of the condo and increase your ownership component. Or anytime after the third year, excuse me, if you decide that you want to buy the condo, it's at that point that you get to go to the bank and say, here's my agreement. Here's how much the condo's worth. Here's how much I own in it. Do I qualify? I want to buy the rest of the guy out of the asset owner. And so the bank, and it's up to the bank to say, yes, you qualify. And if you do, you pay your mortgage fees, you pay your land transfer tax, you pay your legal fees, but you also get to use at this point your first-time buyer credit, as well as any RSPs that you have. So in essence, what we're creating is this sort of synthetic ownership where the costs to actually do the transfer are deferred, until such time that it makes sense. Because maybe in 3 years, you're like, do I really want to do I want to use my first time buyer credit on this condo? Or maybe it makes sense for me to leave and use my first time buyer credit and my RSPs on that house in the country or that bigger 3-bedroom, whatever. So
Right.
it gives people a lot more opportunity.
So, and that you just answered a question that I had in terms of, my real estate brain went to the sort of that logistics of it in the closing. So they don't actually get added on title at this point in time. Then the
No.
asset owner still remains the deed owner and their name on title.
Yeah.
This is an agreement that's registered on title, though, I guess, to protect their interest.
It's a literally just a paper agreement, but it's it's been checked over by lawyers, and obviously I think the first clause is make sure you have a lawyer look over this, right? Because
Absolutely.
you want to make sure you don't want to have any bad feeling. We're not trying to hide anything. We're actually trying to help people. So that's the beauty of it. And I think the reality is, how does one define ownership? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is ownership defined by the fact that my name is on title, or is it defined by I think that we live in 2022 almost, and we've been doing it the same way for hundreds of years, right? Yep. In fact, the word mortgage is like an ancient term in Latin means death pledge, right?
Yes,
so
that's right.
So you have to, if you want to solve problems, you can't work inside the existing box. You got to think a little bit. I hate to say outside the box, but you have to expand the size of that box and make it more sensible.
No, and listen, and then you're right. And these times call for this kind of creative, ingenious kind of thinking. As long as the models make sense for everybody that's participating in them, right? And they're not weighted in favor of one way or the other. So, not to sound like the cold hard capitalist, and everything else, but and it's a lovely model and key. It's a great opportunity, but. Key's got somebody that works at Key. Key's got to make money. So how does Key make money? And who's topping up these extra $15,000 or these extra $5,000 or where is that money coming from and stuff?
So that's just a kind of like a margin account for the most part. That's the best way I describe that. It's not going anywhere. It's just sitting there, but you get the benefit of it, right?
Okay.
But how we make money is, we make money a couple different ways. We'll make money via the onboarding of the owner resident. So it's 1%. Full disclosure: you pay $15,000, we charge you $150. Okay. So it's not killing you. And if you leave with 30, we're charging you $300. So it's not not monumental. But what we're doing is we are acting like property manager. So someone who owns 10 units and who's working downtown and doesn't have the time to manage it is paying a property manager. We're just taking over that role. The difference is that we're doing better reporting, and we are able to, ensure that we're getting a good co-owner to invest in your unit. So we've got to do our due diligence on that as well. And so we're making a monthly payment on that asset owner, and then ultimately transaction fees. So if the unit comes to us and it's vacant and we have to find somebody, there's a transaction fee involved with that. So it's not rocket science, but at scale it becomes really interesting. And we've already put 20 some odd people in units this year. We've got another 8 or 10 units lying around. We have a team on the ground in Vancouver. And what's interesting, that on every single day I get a call from somebody who doesn't live in Toronto who is interested in our model. I've had Kingston, Ottawa, Kitchener, Vancouver, Victoria, Kelowna, Edmonton, Calgary. This is not a a Vancouver problem. This is a national problem.
Oh, 100%.
And I think that we have to look at it, in a different perspective.
Absolutely, no question. In fact, you got my brain working because I just closed on 2 units, and I'm thinking, geez, they would make really good candidates for your model.
Perfect.
Now, the scenario where someone says, I'm in it for a year and now I got transferred to whatever, can they still keep their foot in that in that model, or no? Once you're gone, you're gone. If you're not living
Yeah.
there,
So,
you can't keep it. Then is that
and
it?
I do have people say, "Well, can I buy a unit and rent it out?" And we say that's not that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. We don't want people to use our model to invest and make more money for themselves. We want to solve this problem. And quite frankly, what the pandemic has shown us is that the people that we need in the city the most are the ones that aren't able to buy. They are the nurses and their frontline workers and healthcare workers and teachers, and like the list is monumental. These people have no chance of getting into getting into home ownership, and that's a real problem, and that's what we're trying to solve. I think ultimately, though, as we scale and as we open up other markets, and that vision of what that's going to look like, in 5 to 10 years from now, is somebody who's living in Toronto says, "I just got transferred out to Vancouver," and they go onto their phone and they say, "Hey, there's a vacant unit in this building that's a key building," and they just whoosh do this and switch and just move their equity over and just continue what they're doing in Vancouver. Like, if we could do that, I mean, that's definitely something that we want to be able to do, and having the technology, to move people around that easily is really something that we work hard at. So we have a strong, small but mighty team, 18 I think plus now, and our application process is getting smoother. Always, there's always little bumps in the road for sure, but we have a community manager, and I think what we're trying to accomplish is to build a system where that person who moves in is really well treated right from the very beginning. We have someone that will book the elevator and who will stay there after hours to accept packages, because we can work remotely, and we have a community manager, Brianna, who does a killer job at that. Things break, we get them, we look after, we get it fixed. So trying to create this sort of white glove treatment, and give people, a really great sense of being involved in our movement.
So you just said something that again, I run a property management business. And I've owned rentals and sold them and got some new ones now. And so let's say something breaks in the unit. That cost, does that get apportioned according to your equation there between the asset owner and the candidate that's living in the unit, or how does that?
So again, depending on what breaks, like if it's a heating and air conditioning or window or something like that, that's sort of like an envelope type of situation. Then obviously the condo board is responsible for that. If it's an appliance that you're not responsible for breaking, like you didn't put your hand through a window or do something like that. So that monthly payment that you make is what we do is we pay. So we collect it. Let's say it's $2,000. We pay the taxes. We pay the maintenance fees. We put $50 into your equity account. We pay that small interest payment loan for you, and the balance goes to the asset owner minus our fee, which whatever that is, $100 or something like that. And then we also hold back a tiny little bit, almost like a condo unit reserve.
Okay.
Which is meant for those sort of things. So if something breaks, we can take from that. So the owner resident isn't responsible.
So does the asset owner have to have the asset free and clear of any encumbrances? No, it can be mortgaged,
because
right?
We're just giving them whatever's left. And if they have to pay a mortgage, then they'll do that.
Okay, so that's up to them. So they've got to really go into it knowing what their math is, and that's where this monthly amount has to sort of make sense for the asset owner, right? Because if you're subsidizing it, it kind of doesn't make sense anymore, right? So it's got to be a number that, or I mean, you tell me. I mean, are there asset owners that are breaking even or making a little bit of profit? How is that playing out?
I don't know if anyone is losing. I mean, I think there are investors in the Toronto market that are losing. I can remember buying condos. In the day when it was like, okay, I'm going to be ahead after all this. I'm going to be ahead to $100, and then it went down a month, right? And then it went down to being kind of even. And then it went down to losing 200, no big deal. Now it's probably like 700 to 1,000 a month that you're losing. But you're saying, hey, it only has to go up by 12,000 and I'm going to break even, right? But obviously, we have to do our due diligence, and we don't just take everybody. We want to make sure that, number one, is the asset owner sound? Does the building make sense for us, right? Is it well run? Who built it? What's the reputation? Like, where's the potential for it to go down the road? Like, all those things are super important to us. So we have to do our due diligence kind of on our side to make sure that it's a viable unit that we want to offer to people, because ultimately our name is behind it.
Right. So take this generic condo in Toronto at $600,000. If it's excuse me, if it's a one bedroom, what's I'm a little out of touch with Toronto rents, but what's the market rent for a unit like a one bedroom condo?
Well, a one bedroom could be anywhere from like 1950 all the way up to about 2,300, depending on location.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And then you're right. And you're setting your rates at just below whatever that is, right?
Just a tiny bit below. So it would be like, we have one that was 1911 and one that was 22 something. So they're in line, but they are slightly less because you're putting 2.5%, which lowers not lowers the value, but you have an ownership stake, so you're not going to pay yourself rent, right? We're going to just lower that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. And then getting to determining this initial value for when this transaction gets sort of struck and agreed to, is that done by a third party sort of objective, like an appraisal, or where are you getting your data to do that?
We're really lucky to work in Toronto, where the data that's available is true and accurate, and so we can back up data through Toronto Real Estate Board and do comparative studies on units in a building, for instance, to determine what's the dollar per square foot for a rental in this building, what's the dollar per square foot for purchase, right? That stuff is easy to find, but we also use automated valuation tools, which maybe are a bit more sophisticated. They're a bit delayed, but they're a bit more sophisticated in terms of what floor is this unit on? How does, where's the view? Is it overlooking, the dumpster on the second floor? Because that might be worth less, right? So obviously we have to use that. And then ultimately, when the owner resident decides to leave, they give us 75 days notice, and that's for us to go in and actually do an honest in-person appraisal, third-party appraisal of the property, so that we can really get that right. Because ultimately, if we're wrong, it looks bad on us. If we're giving too much away, then the asset owner is not happy. If we're not giving enough, then the owner resident's not happy. So we have to be really good and perfect about this. And if an asset owner resident decides to leave, and our response is too low, then there's a system in place for them to obviously say, "Hey, I disagree. Based on my neighbor upstairs, sold their place for way more. What's the deal?" And so we have to be accurate about that.
Okay. So in the situation where how many owner residents have gone on to buy out the units that they're in? Does that happen frequently?
It hasn't happened yet because we've only been in market for a year.
Okay.
So we've been at it for 3 years, and I've been with the company almost the whole time. And I'm employee number 2. So, we did have one who moved in December, and loved their unit but wanted more space. And we had another unit that came available, and they said, "I really want to move to that space." And because he was our number one guy, we're like, sure. And so we actually did move somebody, which is also pretty cool.
Wow.
So, and just sort of a funny note, when the movers came, as they were leaving, they closed a door that it was into the den, and there was a couple of guitars and a sofa and a painting that was in the den that they totally forgot. And so in true startup fashion, myself and someone from marketing and someone from the real estate team and someone from ops, we all got there, and we brought my car, and we threw the sofa, we booked the elevators, and we threw the sofa, and we brought it to the new place, and we carried it upstairs. So this is what you have to do, right, to make people happy.
Absolutely, yeah. No,
I'm not going to do it every time, but
exactly. For the first one, you can, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's great, Mark. I what am I missing? What else should I ask or flesh out then? I guess that you want to get across for.
Yeah,
this,
I think for us, listen, it's a great opportunity for people who, and we've seen. I've seen my parents and my grandparents make so much, intergenerational wealth from real estate, and so it's definitely not for everybody, because people will say, I have a great life and I rent and I'm totally happy and I have this freedom and all that sort of stuff. But for those people who really believe in real estate and who want to play, but want to get into the market but can't, I think he's just a great option. And quite frankly, what we're going to see more of, because in the United States, there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars going towards alternative home ownership. And this is the category that we find ourselves in, right? Whether it's rent to own, which, we've all heard of for such a long time. I mean, how long have you heard of the term rent to own? It's been around forever. Right.
Well, and Mark, just to interrupt you, I mean, when we started talking in my back of my brain, I used to do rent to owns because I started in the late 80s, early 90s when you couldn't give a house away, let alone, I mean, the market's flipped on its head, obviously now, but, and I called them sadly the never, never plans because, the structure was, okay, the asset owner has his asset. He needs to get X to cover his nut. So we're going to set the base rent at that. And then we're going to make the rent X so that the tenant occupant can say, okay, every month now I'm basically paying myself, equity in this property, right? So that after 3 years or 5 years, if you don't go ahead with it, you're paid back X that you put into it. But if you do go ahead with it, then that gets credited towards your down payment. But invariably, the problem became that most people, these tenant occupants, just never qualified or could never get to that, on the right path, right, to getting qualified.
The models have, they've evolved and they've changed and they've pivoted a lot. But at the end of the day, and if we use our $600,000 condo as an example, and market rent is $2,000, you're paying $2,500. That $500 is going towards saving. When you come in, you have to qualify. That means, again, on that 600, you got to make $125,000, and so you're paying more. You have to qualify, and you're locked into a 5-year term, right? Yeah. And if you leave early, and I think the truth is that in downtown Toronto, people do move around a lot, and if you leave early, you pay a penalty, and it'll be pretty ugly, probably. Not all of them, but again, and some of them are different than others, so you really got to do your research. But again, with our model, I think that one of the good things is, the price that you buy it at 5 years from now is the price that you agreed on when you signed the deal. So that's something. Yes. But again, you have to be able to pull through and you have to still qualify, right? So with our model, you're paying less per month. You're not locked in, right? And you don't need to qualify for the mortgage. So your income ratio is much lower. But I think we'll start to see more of that. And, we have to try and find new options for people, whether maybe it's going to be co-living and that's another thing. I don't know if you see that in Kingston, but in Toronto, it's a big thing not a big thing, but it's coming where two people come together to buy a house. So you've got neighborhood, you've got community, you've got schools and all that fun stuff that comes with neighborhoods, like my neighborhood. But ultimately that also comes with its dangers too, right? What's the contract? What happens if you guys don't get along? There's so many variables in that. It's a slippery slope, but it's another way of getting into the market. So
you get a lot of I hate to say it, but the senior demographic, right, have to cohabitate, right? There's three and 4 and 5 people getting together to cohabitate in a home because they need to pool their economic resources in order to be able to afford to live, which is it's sad, but but those are trends that are they need to take hold, or they're going to becoming more prevalent in the future going forward. I mean, just given the cost of everything, right? And I mean, I guess,
go ahead.
No. Well, I'm just saying, the benefit of your model is that, especially, maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it may not have been ready for it. But now, given that, I'll go on record as saying, I dare say we're not, you can never say never, but I don't think we'll ever experience, a drop in the market ever again, in the sense that things are going to go depreciate in value. You know what I'm saying? There's just not enough inventory. We all know that the trend is that going forward. There's not enough housing to satisfy the demand at any given time now going forward. So there's very little risk or minimal risk to your owner residents, because they know that whether they're there a year or 2 years or even 3 years, there's going to be appreciable value in the equity that they've already established, right? So I mean that's the
Yeah, I
benefit to
mean,
that model.
sadly, the prices are also going up, but at least you can add to it, and you can sort of jump ahead of that appreciation, and because of the co-financing, you're doubling it. So there's a lot of things, and what I say to realtors, over and over again, when we built Key, we said we want to stand on the shoulders of realtors, right? We want to be able to create another arrow in their quiver of things that they could offer to people. So if you can't buy, you rent, but now you've got Key, or let me introduce you to rent to own, or let me introduce you to co-living. Like there's all these sort of things. And just like everything else, and you've been a realtor for a long time, I think that realtors as a community, they're very slow to adapt to new ideas, which is, that's just par for the course. But, I think that some of the younger guys that I talk to, they're interested. They want to know. I had 2 calls today just from realtors wanting to understand, can this work for my clients? How does it work? Right. So that's great. So we're moving the needle. I know that it's going to take 5 years before we get wide acceptance of this. And then, I always think about it. You've got, I talk to hundreds of people every week who are so enthusiastic. And then I get 1 or 2 that are like, just and they're, they're mean and they're contrary and all that. And I get it. I try to explain, but you can't win everybody over. And, what I'd say is you got to do your own due diligence. You got to accept that there are alternative models out there. I'm not going to sway everybody. I can just do my best. I speak from the heart. I think that I'm honest about what we're trying to do. I'm really committed to making this happen for people, and it's really rewarding. When one of our owner residents says, I was living in a basement apartment. I was saving money to get in, and now I'm living in the 11th floor of a condo building downtown, and I love it. Right. Yeah. So those are things that are great. Or a school teacher who said, I've got savings, but I don't want, and I work downtown. I don't want to have to commute an hour and a half every day just for the privilege of owning. Right. So that's the challenge. Right. And so those are the things. It's a really fun thing to be part of something that's unique, that's going to make a difference. And I hope that in 10 years, people will look back. I'll look back and go, "Wow, I can't believe how hard it was 10 years ago, and how it's just normal."
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I think that definitely. I hope that happens for you, and I can't see why it wouldn't, because you're right. We've got to get outside of these sort of linear ways of thinking real estate. Because it's just not going to be able. If we keep doing that, then there's just going to be more and more collateral damage, I guess, as we go forward. Right? There's just going to be a smaller and smaller percentage of the population that there's going to be. Yeah, exactly, like everything too. But well, you know what? And you got me thinking. Afterwards, I'll shoot you a note, but because there's nothing in Kingston yet, right, in terms of a presence for Key. But I know the Kingston Area Real Estate Board, they always have all these different webinar hosts or whatever that have these different topics. You'd be a fantastic candidate for something like that. Yeah, so you know what? I might send an email to you and copy our executive director of the real estate board to see if that can happen for you.
Yeah. Years and years ago, I could tell you that I almost bought the what's the big hotel down at the bottom of the
Prince George Hotel.
Prince George. I was very close to buying the Prince George. So
wow!
I used to party in dollar bills. So
yeah,
I'll tell you how old I am. Anyway.
Well, and I forgot, I didn't mention at the top, but Mark mentioned to me, those that are listening, that his grandparents were U.S. were in Watertown, but then immigrated to Kingston, right, and spent some time here in Kingston.
Right. My dad went to Kingston High School, and aunts and uncles, so I really connected to it. And I think there was something similar. Options for Homes, I think, had a building in Kingston. Yes. And so Options for Homes is kind of similar. It's a kind of a co-ownership, co-equity kind of model. But as I understand it, once you're in, like, the next person can't have that again. Like, they don't get that option. Right. So with ours, it's repeating. So a little bit different, and still you have to qualify. You still have to go through the normal channels. So the Options for Homes is probably one of the closest similarities to us. But again, we just I think have a bit more freedom. So, and do your research, figure out what works for you. Rent to own might work for you. Key living might work for you. Co-ownership might work. Renting might work.
Well, and you know, and I'm not casting dispersions over the company that's doing it. I even forget the name of it, but you know, there was some that news story that came out several weeks ago, in fact, a couple months ago, about that large conglomerate that's buying up units in Kingston and Hamilton and the GTA and converting them to rentals, to legal secondary suites and everything like that. And there was some pros and cons to that as well, right? And because it's about building, you know, they're in for the profit, right? Not in so much for the affordability. And I'm not saying that to be disparaging. It is what it is. I mean, hey, you're in business to be in business, but you know, that's where, you know, a model like Key can sort of fit into those, you know, into those crevices and be an option. I really believe that. And listen, Mark, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and explaining this to us. It's great. I hope our listeners get something out of it. And I'm going to hook you up and see if you can't get to be a presenter here at the Kingston Area Real Estate Board and expose yourself to some of the agents.
We've got roots in the community there, so I'd love happy to do it. Listen, thank you so much for the opportunity, and keep minds open. It's awesome. I watched some of your stuff before. It's great. Keep doing what you're doing, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much. And listen, you have a great Christmas. Stay safe, and I'm sure we'll talk again then. So,
all right, man. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.